Hey there, it's Lauren from HSPJourney. Today we've got Lori Cangilla with us again. So excited, Lori's in the house.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and you got your Christmas sweater on too. I like that.
I do. It's cold here in Pittsburgh. I am ready for the winter.
Awesome. Lori is just a wonderful guest writer. She writes almost monthly for HSPJourney, and we just appreciate her wisdom. And this next article that we're going to talk about is breathwork. Lori is a licensed psychologist and runs a fabulous blog and community over at singularlysensitive.com. And I'll put the links down at the bottom below this video on YouTube. Lori, take it away. Tell us a little bit about breathwork and what you found in your own practice before we jump into the particular styles.
Yeah, so breath work is really just refers to any kind of conscious process where we're paying attention to the way we're breathing. And as highly sensitive people, that's especially important because it's what helps us to settle down our nervous systems. So when we're mentally overwhelmed, we're physically or emotionally overstimulated, overstressed, taking charge of our breath can really help our bodies to re-regulate and bring us back into a calmer place. So I love breath work. I do it at some point with all my clients. I do a lot of it on my own. It's one of those things that I think everyone can benefit from.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you could tell, I just took a deep breath like in between because I will start talking too fast. And so I also will just take a breath when the other person is speaking, just kind of recenter, get that heart rate to slow down a little bit. And I find absolutely that it helps me. So I was really excited that you wrote on this topic. So walk us through, what are the 5 different breathwork techniques?
So I'm going to start with talking about mindful breathing. And I always start with this because it doesn't require us to make any changes. We're just simply noticing our breathing, and it can help people to find a place on their body to focus on. So some people like to focus on the sensation of the air going in and out of their nostrils. I personally like to put a hand on my chest and hand on my abdomen and just notice my body breathing that way. And the purpose and the goal behind mindful breathing is really just to notice your breathing. You're not trying to change it. You're not trying to make any kind of adjustments. Just notice what's happening and just try to accept it for what it is. What usually happens, though, is if we stick with mindful breathing for a while, we find our breathing slowing down.
Okay.
We
So
find
that's
that it
just
becomes a
noticing.
little
So just
harder.
hand on chest, hand
Yeah,
on heart, and like maybe you're at a stoplight and you're almost late for
absolutely.
work, or you're picking, in my case, picking a kid up and there's massive
Yep.
traffic and you're like, why? I live in a
Oh,
suburban town. Why is there so much traffic? So it's just like taking that, maybe turn the radio off, um, close your eyes if you want to, and just notice. So that's huge for HSPs, right? Half of the battle is just noticing what's going on.
right, right. And because so much of the time we are racing from one thing to another, and as HSPs, our minds are already really active in the background anyway, we can really lose track of what's happening in our body. So mindful breathing is a great way to do that. You can even
Awesome.
do it in a meeting, or if you're in a Zoom like this, you could put your hands down on your abdomen or in your lap and, kind of be off camera, but still noticing your breathing that way.
Right, right, right. That's good. I know this is a total aside, but I did video therapy through COVID, and she would do the EMDR, but it was like the squeeze. So instead of, EMDR, if you've ever
Mm-hmm.
done that, it's like eye movement related. She taught me this one that's just squeezing the arm. So even if I'm off camera now, and I could do that with my elbow. So say I'm in a client meeting or a video call that's stressing me out, I could be doing this under the table here, not under the table, under the Zoom screen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So love
Yeah,
those
and I'm
techniques.
not EMDR trained, but I would think that being able to just bring the mindful breathing into those bilateral movements would probably be really helpful.
Yeah. Cool. So what's number 2 on your breathwork list?
So number 2 is one that a lot of my clients like. It's called four square breathing or box breathing. And basically what you do is you inhale to a slow count of 4. So just inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. You pause for 4. You exhale to a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you pause again before you take your next inhale. And box breathing is kind of cool. You can imagine the visual. Some people really like that image. They sort of imagine like the sides of a square lining up in their brain as they're doing that.
Yeah.
Some people like the counting effect. It can be a really calming process because it gives you something to focus on. And you are trying to change your breathing, unlike with mindful breathing, but it tends to be really gentle. People will vary the speed of the counting so that it shortens or lengthens that process. But it tends to be like very nice and predictably rhythmic. And sometimes when our bodies are really like, if we're very upset and we're sort of like taking really shallow, quick breaths, this is a good one to help settle that down.
Agreed. That's one of my favorite ones. And I find that I don't fully notice how anxious I might actually be feeling until I get to that hold. Because you like breathe in, okay, you're like super fast, and then you're like, oh gosh, 4, 3, 2, 1. It like seems like forever. But once you've done it maybe 2 or 3 times and you like settle your shoulders, and then it's really, even just doing it for a minute is a lot. It really can work to settle you and kind of reorient your breathing. Great. What's number 3?
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point. You can sometimes at the beginning, it's really hard to get into these more rhythmic breathing patterns. But as you practice, as your body starts to naturally settle down, it gets easier to get into.
Totally. So number 3 you have is 4-7-8 breathing. That one is new to me.
Yeah. So this is one that people either love or hate. And I'll be honest, this is one that I don't like. I never do it except for when I'm demonstrating it with my clients. But the basic idea is that you inhale to a count of 4, you hold for 7, and you exhale at a count of 8. And as soon as you do 8 on what would be sort of the 9th beat, then you start your inhale again. People really like it because it does lengthen out that pause and the exhale, which tends to just naturally settle our bodies down. Our bodies tend to have a little bit longer exhale process on a natural breathing rhythm. I personally find it very hard to focus on, okay, I breathed into a count of 4 and now I'm counting to 7 and then to 8. And I just find that the way that that's not an even process is unpleasant to me. I like styles of breathing that allow me to be a little bit more consistently rhythmic. So the 4 square breathing is much more appealing to me. But the great thing about all these breathwork styles is there's no one that's better or worse. You find what you like and stick to it. If you're new to it, I'd say practice it a couple of times, for 30 seconds or a minute, and see what you like.
Oh, I love that. So number 4, you have a circular breathing. Tell us about this one.
So if you think about how people breathe when they're really deeply asleep, or if you've ever seen really little babies breathe, their breathing tends to be really smooth. If you're watching their abdomen or their chest, it's hard sometimes to notice when the inhale stops and the exhale starts. It's very, very slow and smoothed out. And with circular breathing, that's what you're trying to create for yourself. So you would imagine kind of taking in a breath. Sometimes people even combine this with like an image of like blowing up a balloon and letting it go down again. But you take in a breath at whatever pace is comfortable to you, and you just sort of imagine like you're blowing, you're going around the circle. And at some point, your body knows it needs to start to exhale, and you let yourself do that. And it doesn't have to be exactly the same amount of time on the inhale and the exhale. There's no counting involved. It's really just sort of listening to what feels good in your body in that moment. And same thing, as you begin your exhale, you let that air come back out. And whenever it makes sense for you and your body just naturally decides it wants to take more of a breath, you let that happen. What I really like about circular breathing is that it's great if you are having a hard time getting your breath to settle, because whenever you're done inhaling and it's time for you to exhale in that moment is fine. You're not trying to time that to something that you're counting or anything like that. You just go with what happens. And just like with all these strategies, your body eventually takes over. We are built to breathe deeply and rhythmically. And so if we can get our minds settled and our nervous system to calm down a little bit and just let our breathing do what it's meant to do will settle into that circular pattern.
I love that. So maybe for me, I might try circular breathing as a start and then kind of take that into box breathing because, I tend to keep breath up here and the circular kind of reminds you to go full circle, if you will. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love
Yeah. And I
it.
think you can get really creative with how you pair these up. I worked with college students once, and a couple of them like to go through like the whole list in the order that I gave them, and they would do all of them back to back. And I thought that was kind of a neat way of approaching it sort of as a task. I'm going to do this just like I might do reps of a physical exercise.
That's great. That's great. So last but not least, number 5 is wave breathing. Tell us about this one.
So wave breathing is kind of a nice combination of a lot of different styles of breathing. And I always use it in combination with imagery. So I grew up on Lake Erie. I love being by a beach with like a big lake, like the Great Lakes, or out on the ocean. And if you can imagine what waves look like on a big body of water, they come up, they crest, and they gradually come back down. And then behind them, another wave is forming. And so with wave breathing, you combine that imagery of what waves look like with allowing your breath to just sort of follow that wave. So as the wave is coming up, you're breathing in. When the wave starts to crash, you breathe out. And when the next wave starts to form, you come up. And so it tends to be sort of this melodic, swaying sort of breathing style that some people really, really like. Some people also need something to do with their mind, and they don't necessarily want to count, but they really like to focus on sort of a wave imagery. So if you have a favorite beach that you'd like to go to and you can picture that in your mind, that's great. If you don't, it's okay to just make your own wave imagery and sort of sync the wave imagery up to your own breathing too. So you can go at it this either way, but it's a nice way to get some of the smoothness of circular breathing with that paying attention and noticing of the mindful approaches. But then it also has a more predictable pattern like the box breathing or the 4-7-8 breathing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I use ocean sounds a lot just to relax, or actually I'm a proponent of the 20-minute nap.
Absolutely.
And so, but my cues, so the trick with this, for those listening, if you haven't tried, it's kind of a strategy, and you kind of teach your body to sort of go into this sleep, but it's not a deep sleep. So you come out of it quickly, but I cue myself with the ocean sounds music. And then like, I don't get under my sheets. I lay on top and have a blanket. Like there's a few different things. So it doesn't feel like bedtime. But the ocean sounds, I'm willing to bet, and now I'm going to go look that if there's kind of even sound, some of them, it's like multiple crashes of waves or music kind of playing underneath, but I'm willing to bet that there's some on Spotify or Amazon Music, some wave tracks that maybe you could sync up the breath work to. That would be cool.
I cannot personally recommend one, but I bet there would be. I actually, a couple years ago when I was on vacation in North Carolina, just recorded some waves at night. And sometimes I will listen to those too. And I notice that my breath at this point just syncs up to those pretty easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if
Well,
you're not a wave person, that's okay.
yeah. Yeah. You don't have to be a wave person. One time we were on vacation, it was our 20th anniversary, and we were down in Mexico, and they had paddle boards, and I'd never paddle boarded on the ocean before. And I have a blow up, and I've used it on rivers and lakes. But on the ocean, the undulation of those big giant waves, it's totally different. And so I had this like aha moment out there that my knees couldn't be locked and I had to be more flexible, and you have to kind of ride the waves. So I don't know, the waves, the metaphors abound, right? So maybe, who knows, maybe you're choosing waves as your breathing technique, and it will inspire you to do something creative and fun with that. So thank you again, Lori, for coming on today. I know this is going to be helpful for people to have the actual techniques kind of modeled from you. That's really wonderful and helpful. And as always, I say be sensitive and be free, that there is freedom in kind of knowing who we are, how we're wired. So I leave you with that. And thanks until we meet again, Lori.
Thanks so much for having me, Lauren.